Hello and welcome to Airship Dreams! I'm SITA, and in this documentary we'll be learning all about Bedford's incredible engineering heritage and its identity as the historical centre of the UK's airship industry. We'll explore how Cardington, a small village 5 miles from Bedford, came to be a centre of airship development. We'll look at the feats of engineering it took to build the huge R100 and R101, the stories of the staff and crew, and what life was like aboard these cruise ships of the skies. This is a story of flight, fantasy and exploration, but also one of greed and folly. 2020 marks the 90th anniversary of the last flight of the infamous R101, a hugely important moment in Bedford's, indeed the world's, airship history. Can you imagine, even remember a time when international flight was just an aspiration? 1930 was a time of dreams and ambitions. How would it be possible to traverse land and sea by new, innovative means and methods? Bedford Creative Arts have teamed up with the Higgins Bedford and the Airship Heritage Trust to launch a programme of exhibitions and events that celebrate Bedford's airship history. We'll be announcing some exciting opportunities and we would love for you to get involved. But first, let's find out where all of this began. Airships are powered balloons that can sail through the sky because they're filled with a gas that is lighter than air. They are quiet but huge. Our story starts with the Short Brothers Engineering Company. Meet Eustace, Oswald and Horace Short. They were true pioneers of aviation. In 1886, when they were young boys, they couldn't believe their eyes when they saw an aeronaut in a balloon flying over their house. How grand it must be to float in space, they thought. Their fascination with flight had been ignited, and in 1901 they built their first balloon. In 1916 they won a contract to build their first airship. They were so excited about this and moved to start construction in Bedford. First, they built the shed. It needed to be big enough to build and house the airships, and they needed an Act of Parliament to release the thousands of tons of steel to construct the Cardington shed alone. It became the biggest shed of its type in Britain at the time. The brothers started building their first airship, the R31, in 1917 in response to German Zeppelin airships dropping bombs on Britain during World War I. They also built a village for their workers known as Shortstown. It survives as a residential area of Bedford today. The Short brothers' involvement at Cardington came to an end in 1919 when the site was nationalised. It became the Royal Airship Works, run by the government. After the war, the government became involved in efforts to turn airships into luxurious passenger craft to compete with ocean liners and linking the British Empire. In 1924, Lord Thompson, who was Secretary of State for Air, spearheaded the new campaign. LYDIA SAUL, Keeper of Social History at the Higgins Bedford, will now tell us all about the programme.
In the 1920s, the Imperial Airship Scheme is something they want to build pride and innovation across the country. And so there is a competition effectively takes place. There is an airship sponsored and paid for as a private enterprise through Vickers up in Howden in Yorkshire. And so the R100 starts to be built up there, and that is in conversation and consultancy with Barnes Wallis and Neville Shute. And so those two people are very involved in the development of that airship. Down here in Cardington, the government starts to build their own airship, the R101.
As LYDIA says, it was a project of national significance and pride, but full of responsibility for the designers testing this new technology. Stainless steel girders were used for the R101's main frame. The girders were woven together like a giant Meccano set. The airship was filled with gas bags. Hydrogen was used because it is the lightest element and provided the most lift. However, it is highly flammable. The gas bags were made of intestines of oxen. Large teams of women cleaned the intestines and made the outer cover. It took 400 people nearly 2 hours to get the airship from the shed onto the mast where it could be docked. The mast had stairs and a lift. At the top, a canvas screen had to be erected around the gangway to the ship after complaints from faint-hearted passengers of the visible height. Here's Alistair Lawson from the Airship Heritage Trust to tell us more.
The loss of the R101 can be seen as very much an aerial Titanic. It was on the evening of the 4th of October 1930 when the R101 left the mast at 6:36 in the evening. It had been recorded that bad weather was approaching, but the crew were quite confident that they could outrun the storm that was coming. It left the mast and it made a circle over Bedford, as it always did, as a salute to the workers who'd worked on the ship. It then headed south down towards London and out towards the coast. By 9 o'clock, it had started to cross the coast at Hastings and reported back that the weather had worsened, the wind had increased, and also they were experiencing very, very heavy rain. It crossed the coast and headed into northern France. Nothing untoward at this point was reported back. Just after the crew had changed watch, it's believed about 2:10, the R101's outer cover in the nose, a large rent appeared. Now, at this point, it had been about 6 hours of persistent rain and had been flying into the storm, and a tear occurred across the top of the nose. Now, this caused the first 3, we believe, gas bags to deflate, and that caused the nose to drop. The crew reacted immediately, and so they started to pull the nose up by raising the elevator fin in the tail. However, it's believed that a wire snapped in the elevator in the tail, which caused a second dive. And at this point, the crew realised that they were going to have to do an emergency landing. So it was signalled for the engines to stop and they would bring the ship down. Now, the ship landed with more of a crunch than a crash, and it bounced about 60 feet forward. Now, 60 feet sounds like a lot, but when you're 777 feet long, that's not a lot. So the impact was very gentle. It's believed that the hot fumes from a petrol starter motor combined with the heat from the engines caught fire. And it's this that caught the leaking hydrogen, which again inflamed the outer cover and unfortunately consumed the ship. Unfortunately, only 6 survivors managed to escape from the wreckage, and 48 other passengers and crew perished.
On the 10th of October, having been transported to Britain, the victims lay in state in Westminster Abbey, where thousands of people paid their respects, as many as those who mourned the death of Princess Diana. Many sent tributes at the time of what was regarded a national tragedy. The following day, 1 week after the disaster, the dead were transported to Bedford by train and met by 24 RAF tenders ready to carry the coffins to Cardington. Every shop and factory in Bedford was closed for the day, and the route lined with crowds. The 48 victims were laid to rest at Cardington, where so many had spent their life's work building the R101. With the death of Lord Thompson and Sefton Branca, the Director of Civil Aviation, and many well-respected airship technicians and crewmen, the airship programme was brought to a close. The R100 never flew again. Despite plans for the R102 and R103 already well advanced, neither ever left the drawing office. Beyond the loss of faith in British airships, the impact of the Wall Street crash and economic downturn of the 1930s was the main reason for this. The Royal Airship Works was closed, dealing Bedford a massive blow in redundancies. The R100 was sold for scrap for £427, while the remains of the R101 were left on the hillside where it had crashed until eventually collected for scrap. The R101 disaster may have marked the end of the production of giant airships in this country, but it was not the end of Cardington's story. Today, the 2 sheds dominate the skyline for many miles around. They are powerful landmarks for the amazing airship industry in Bedford. This brings us to now. Bedford Creative Arts have launched an amazing community art project called Airship Dreams, working closely with award-winning artist Mike Stubbs, who grew up in the town. We're asking you to share your own experiences and memories to inform this project and to add to our online community archive, with the possibility of even being included in the Airship Dreams exhibition. What are your connections with Bedford's airship heritage? What memories, stories or memorabilia do you or your family have from this time? What future do you imagine for flight and air travel? Visit airshipdreams.com for full details of how you can get involved. To share something, tag us on Twitter or Instagram using the hashtag AirshipDreams, or you can email hello@airshipdreams.com or call us on 01234 818 670. Whether it's a video of your grandma describing a memory, a photo of an object from that time, a picture your children have drawn of an airship, or perhaps an email about your dreams of flying, we want to hear from you. Let's get airship dreaming.